Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my excellent co-host James Rhodes for United Muppeteers. This is, of course, on the Monday. We finally got the show out on a Monday, mate. I could finally afford your appearance fee on a Monday, and
Uh,
we're, of course, shortly after the Everton draw at the weekend, and a number of United news making the headlines, of course, with internal changes relating to Ineos and there's been seems like every other day, and it's interesting, James, as I say Ineos, but we've just become so used to using that term. But actually,
yep.
it's bizarre. We'll get into that. Why every negative decision seems to be framed as an Ineos decision when it's clearly more than that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about some of the stuff that's been making the headlines. United fans being, or United staff being threatened with
Yep.
being sacked for leaks. The cost cutting and. Of course, United also got Sociedad in Europa, which is an interesting tie, and a few other things making the headlines. First of all, how you doing, man?
Good, good. I'm doing well. I hope you are also, but yeah,
Mm,
never a dull day, is it? With things to discuss.
yeah. Well, as I was mentioning before on the air, I was quite sick over the weekend. I was quite
Yeah.
sick last week too, so hopefully that's it behind me. But nonetheless, I did drag myself through. Part of the reason why I was able to watch the Everton game was because I was up. It's 4:30 in the morning here, obviously, but I was up quite sick. And for 70 minutes that game, it certainly didn't
Yep.
help. Another game, James, were a number of concerns, one or two positives, because you don't want to focus too much on the negatives. Concerns in some of the comments I felt after the game where Dallo was saying that they didn't have. I want to quote him correctly here about the manager was upset over them not executing the plan. I heard Bruno
Right.
Fernandez saying about that. So I'm paraphrasing here. Forgive me for not having this in front of me, but Dallo did say that. What was the correct quote, James? They didn't have. They didn't. He didn't completely agree with the plan. Or the players didn't have confidence in the plan. Sorry, I should have had this
I don't
prepared.
remember the exact one. I have to
Well,
look more.
nonetheless, it was suggestive
Yeah.
that they did not have confidence in the plan that they were being asked to execute before the game. And then I heard Bruno Fernandez talk about it. And then Bruno Fernandez says, sometimes when you're down, you have a bit more freedom when you're losing to play. And that's partly why they get back into the game, or citing that as part of the reason why. That would be concerning to me. Again, Rasmus Hojlund has had a pretty rough afternoon. And but on the positive, brilliant goal from Bruno Fernandez and from Manuel Ugarte, and United
Yes.
almost won that game. I thought Big Xerxes again had quite a good game. I thought Dorgu had a really decent game.
Yep.
I thought there was at least some positives because we talked about the Everton game on Thursday's pod. I didn't expect United would win there, and
Yep.
I would have taken a draw before I went.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, Liverpool went to Goodison last week and came away with a point as well. And they, battered City at the weekend and are obviously far and away kind of running away with the league, unfortunately. I think under David Moyes, Everton went into this weekend with the second most points in the league. So, a tough game. It shouldn't be underwritten as looked at a game that's easy. I mean, going away to Goodison was always difficult, but I think now, given the emotion of everything, that was part of it, and
Yeah.
I think we saw quite a lot of that in the first half, which was really frustrating, because, Everton, we've seen with the United team that there's games where they can turn up, and this has been going on for years, right? We saw it even this season under Amorim against Liverpool away. They turned up really hard and had a great game against Liverpool, got a 2-2 draw, got a point there as well at Anfield, and we know that, Everton will be 100% up for every single game at the moment, especially at home and with everything going on. And they clearly were. And the first half I thought was kind of really a story of something that's frustrating. And I don't usually talk about
Mm.
it too much, but I did feel like in this case, the levels of effort and things were really lacking in the first half from a lot of players. There were so many just basics. A 5-yard pass under no pressure, just missed. There was a moment where United took a corner and they took it short and they couldn't even complete pass between each other
Mhm.
under no pressure, nobody near them. They just turn it over, leading to problems for Everton. When you look at the goal that Everton score in the first goal, especially, it's just bouncing around. Nobody's really trying to clear the ball. Nobody's really attacking it. It's a lot of half movements, half intensity, half
Mhm.
effort, half
Yep.
energy, half speed, which was really frustrating. And that's off. You can't afford that. You can't get away with that. In this league at any given time. And I don't always feel like that some of the concerns or critiques over effort have been there, but in this one I did. Um, just call it effort, call it focus. It didn't really matter. The types of mistakes they're making in that first half have really nothing to do with anyone but themselves. You can when you're making those mistakes, 5-yard passes, you can only point the finger, at yourself because these are things that everybody knows how to do. No coach can coach those out of you. Nobody's teaching you to make a 5-yard pass at 25 years old as a
Mm.
Premier League athlete. The other thing I wanted to mention, just as a negative before going on to some of the positives, is I think the story with Andre Onana has to be
Mhm. Mhm.
mentioned every week now because every week it's costing us a goal, I feel like.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's even an exaggeration. Against Tottenham, parried the ball directly in front of goal from a
Mhm.
shot from the side that results in a goal. The second goal against Everton, again, it's a parry straight up in the air, right in front of the goal, falls down, doesn't have the ability to get up and catch it. You
Mhm.
can't do that. I mean, if the technique is whatever it may be, a good keeper is going to parry the ball to the side, somewhere out of play, a corner, not straight up or catch it. You will watch games, and I watched most every other game that week, and not a single time did I see any other goalie in the league parry the ball like that.
Yeah.
Not one. And it's every week, and I'm not saying there weren't mistakes from defenders and things like that in those instances, but the point of a goalkeeper very often, of course, is to save you a goal for a play where the opponent has outplayed you or you've made a mistake. Otherwise, what's the point in having a goalkeeper? And you will not see a keeper put his, outside of some silly issues playing out the back that some teams get caught in here and there. You will not see a keeper week in and week out putting their team into impossible situations on fairly routine saves that result in a better chance for the opposition. I mean, against Tottenham, for example, that the parry in front to
Mhm.
James Madison for that goal was, in terms of expected goals, was more than half of the goal they created chance in the whole game, just off of that, and it's got to be a bit soul destroying, confidence crushing. We saw there was a game earlier in the season against not that long ago against I think it was Forest that United were kind of clawing back into down a goal. They were really starting to push on, and then it was just losing the ball straight into the striker and putting the game to bed. And it's often sending the team down by 2 goals rather than 1. And these are mistakes that are so hard to work back from for a team, and I think it's becoming a real problem.
I think a couple of things in his defense. I think if Onana was playing for a much better team in a different league that requires different attributes, he would be. I think he's, when you're in Inter Milan, you're not facing as many crosses, as many,
Yeah.
physical, plus you're dominating a lot of games. I think in his defense, I I'm astonished at the level of goalkeeping across football in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is really, really poor. And every single week I'm seeing
Yeah.
calamitous mistakes from goalkeepers, from doing things that misplacing passes, so many like I was watching, the Villa Chelsea game, ball slipping underneath Raya, and I just see this every single week where I Ben Onana for who?
Yep. Yeah.
Because we
I mean, that's
goalkeepers are
yeah.
going through a serious identity crisis. United's not an easy team to play in because you're constantly under pressure and you've got nervous defenders in front of you. And I agree completely that you should be parrying those balls, like the one that led to the penalty. To me, you should be parrying those balls that wasn't given, of course, away
Yep.
from your goal. Simon Madison, away from your goal. I just don't know what the obvious alternative is. I would also say that I wouldn't blame him for either of the goals. To me, it's just really poor defending. Like the first one, United have, I think, Big Maguire should be, in my opinion, a lot more physical.
Yes.
Rasmus
Yep. For
Hojlund
sure.
is on the edge of the box and is really weak in the
Yeah.
header, which returns the
Yes.
ball. They've had a number of attempts to get that ball, and they're 50-50s. And
Yep.
it looked like nobody wanted to take responsibility. And when they
Correct.
did, they were half-hearted headers. The
Yep.
second one, Big Maguire will be disappointed. He's an experienced defender. I don't know if Onana's communicating that, he's got a player right behind him, but
Right.
you don't ball watch when there's a ball on the edge. You sense danger as a defender. So you have to have
Yep.
awareness. That ball's in the air. Even if you can't see someone behind you, you have to assume that there is. And
Yep.
Maguire should be on top, not waiting till the ball comes down. Okay. Make
Yeah.
sure the first thing you do is you go meet that ball and clear it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't.
I
To me,
totally
like
agree.
that is
Yeah.
really, really poor for. I mean, I don't want to go in two-footed, but like that is really poor defending, James. And
Yeah, I agree, and I do also think Maguire had a pretty poor game, in general on that front as well.
yeah, I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
to me, like these are the things that frustrate me when you see the lack of intensity in United's play. I can forgive a lot, James, but the lack of intensity has nothing to do with the manager. There's something
Yes.
really fundamentally wrong there. I mean, 70 minutes again before United get a shot on target, and it comes from a
Yep.
free kick. I
Yep.
mean, this is happening every single. The first half is a total waste of time. Like, what are they
Yeah.
doing?
Yep.
Like, why is there no Bruno Fernandes's penalty against Brighton is the last time United scored an away goal in the
Mhm.
Premier League. I'm quoting that correctly. But I don't understand why they go out with that lack of intensity that is so obvious to me.
Yeah.
And so, to me, really poor goals to give away, and they done well to get back in the game. But in true United fashion, they almost threw it away. Now, I don't think that's a penalty, right? Ashley Young sells the penalty. Ashley Young's known for doing this at Manchester United as well. And one of the things that's quite interesting to me is, look, United are on their knees, James, right? I mean, they've been taking a battering for years now. I mean, it must even get boring for
Yep.
other rivals to now continue to take a piss in it. Like, it's just, the novelty of it is gone. But it shows you just how much United still penetrate the national consciousness, the collective unconsciousness of the whole country still, where
Yep.
there is one dubious decision that goes in their favor, and they've ignored the absolute litany of blatant decisions that
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
go in United's favor, for
Unbelievable.
months. Like
Yep.
the deficit here is United. If anyone was owed a
Yep.
decision, and that wasn't even, like, to me, like that to me is not a penalty. And
Yep.
and if it is a penalty, I've got about 15 I want to show you that United haven't gotten.
Yep.
But still, we're talking, we've got people, Keith Hackett, talking about, there's going to be sanctions again. I mean, what? I mean,
I
and
know. I know, man.
anyway, but overall, I don't think it's a bad point. Look, there's a
No.
simple reality we face. United are a mess right now. Going to
Yes.
Goodison and getting a draw and scoring 2 goals and coming back from 2-0. Now, remember, Ruben Amorim is saying against United, it's really important to get the first goal, right?
Yes.
They
Yep.
didn't. They were down 2-0. It's a very, very raucous atmosphere. Goodison, it's the last few games in this stadium, which is a proper football stadium.
Yep.
Everton fans, by the way, Everton fans have come a long way from singing Stuck with Moyes, Man United, whenever he went to United. And I remember them coming to Old Trafford singing Stuck with Moyes, Man United. And now, of course, he is come in, and I quite like Moyes, and
Yeah.
but now, of course, this is the the short memory, the goldfish memory of football fans in it. But overall, plus Ugarte gets his first goal.
Yes.
I don't think it's a terrible point. It wasn't a great performance. We're not going to see great performances between now and the end of the season. United just
Yep.
aren't going to show up, and all of a sudden everything's going to click. It's going to be like this
Correct. Yeah.
till the end of the season. But in the end, I was okay with it.
Well, exactly, and I mean, like you say, at the end of it, we walked away, and it's okay. It's like, all right, fair enough. That's what we got. That's what we got from it. Again, same points as Liverpool got at Goodison, um, and it's really like, you know, we kind of know the issues, right? We know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We know why we're seeing what we're seeing, and we know that we're not expecting it to be brilliant
Yeah.
this year, and we kind of all have already resigned to that fact. Everybody has. So, there's something to be said for that. Now, obviously, we do need to pick up more points, but the other positive I want to take away from it, that I hope will continue through the rest of the season, because there's a way to then gain something really from this year, is Cheeto Obi Martin getting
Yeah.
another appearance, getting
Good
20
shit.
plus minutes this time, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously you could tell from it, nerves,
Of
needs to
course,
settle
man.
in, all of that, but that's why you do it. That's why you get in there. Um, this may not come across as a positive, but I was happy to see that we didn't throw like Lindelof and Eriksson on and used
Mm-hmm.
a young
No, it's a
player
positive.
instead, of that, in order to do it. And I hope that that continues. I hope we see Kone come in there through the rest of the season and start to get some more get minutes in the first team, and that we use the rest of the season to add to some of those players' experiences, gradually in there, to just get some minutes, get some comfort in the team, and take part in it. One thing I do hope is, when, for example, Toby Collier comes back, when Kobe Mainu comes back from injury, because it won't be long for them, or at least for Collier, it's pretty quick. That we do continue that. That there's players in the team who are obviously not going to be here in the future,
Mm.
next year, and next year for sure. If the rest of the season we do, I think you can justify what's happening to a degree, or at least see the positives in it, if you are really building for the future, if you are really, embodying that in the selection and the choices and things like that. And so I hope that we really do see more of that, and continue to see more young players get in, and
Yeah.
selections that are made not for the moment for people who aren't going to be here, but for people who will be here and can grow with this team. At least that'll be a good thing to take away from it.
Well, I think Amarine said something that is right in saying that this is often the time when young players get their chance.
Yeah.
It's very rarely is it a result of a young player just developing, and being put in because they're exceptional. I mean, sometimes that
Yes.
happens, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it's down to an injury crisis or suspension or something happening that gets you an opportunity. If there
Yeah.
was a positive to come from this mess, is if, let's say, one other player emerges from the youth team, or for the under 18s or whatever, or
Yep.
one other young player that comes in that starts to establish himself in the first team, because that is like a new signing, James.
Yep.
And United fans are desperate for some sense of hope that there's something beyond the first
Yeah.
team right now that can come in, that can give United a boost, that can give you something to be excited about. And look, it just cannot be underestimated, the impact of losing players like Ahmad on United.
Yes.
Cannot
Yep.
be underestimated. I mean, we've sat here and justified, well, not you and me, literally, but people have sat here and justified City's collapse on Rodri,
Yeah.
right? Now,
Yep.
why can't, if you look at United, Ahmad's absolutely vital in this
Yep.
team. Kabi Mainu is, absolutely vital in my opinion. And we lose a lot when we don't have him. Lissandro Martinez, James, beyond his defensive
Mm.
capabilities, his creative capabilities, United lose a lot, especially when you're a team that has to create from deep. I mean,
Yep.
you look at the City game, you look at the Liverpool game, big games away from home. Lissandro Martinez was vital in those games. These are massive losses, and I think
For sure.
obviously United don't have the squad to be able to absorb that, but those are massive, massive losses. So I think we have to be realistic about Casemiro and Ericsson to say that neither of them are really capable of giving you anything at this level anymore that is really worth preserving beyond the summer,
Correct. Yeah.
and I think that's going to be something that United have to address. I don't know where they're going to find the resources to do this, but this is something that where if you're a young midfield player in United's academy, and United have some really good young players, this
Yes.
is a great opportunity for you to get yourself into the first team, and I think that's one of you look at City go out and spend about 200 million in January.
Yep.
What they're supposed to have one of the best academies in the world. Why are they not
Yeah.
playing their young kids? United
Yep.
are not, United will not even spend that in the summer
Yep.
before City will go out and spend again. I mean,
Yep.
there has to be some realism here. So,
Yep.
if we saw one or two young players emerge from the academy, they get first team games that can look like they're exciting young prospects, that would be would be a big positive because United aren't going to qualify for Europe through the league.
Correct. Yep.
So I mean, I think what is it? Every position in the league is worth a couple of million
3
in it.
million. Yeah.
So
Something like
so
that. Yeah.
so points is important, but um, I don't. I think that is, if United can get a young player in that first team that establishes themselves, that would be very, very encouraging.
Yes.
I thought Patrick Dorgu had a really good game.
Yes.
Very, very exciting about the other dimension that young lad adds down the left, and certainly for Rasmus Hojlund, it is something, or any central striker, this is very, very important. United obviously have a serious problem with getting central strikers into a game, as we just
Yep.
said, 70th minute, hadn't had a shot on target. Um, Let me ask you about Hojlund, James, because I have two opinions on him, both for and against. What's your take on them?
I think that and it's hard to just from a straight outside look, it feels as though, um, there's obviously a lack of service. There's obviously a lack of getting um, balls into the box, things like that. At the same time,
Mm,
I also see other players come in and make a much bigger impact on the overall game.
mm,
Now, everybody has different strengths and things like
sure.
that. And but that being said, it's not like whatever the strengths may be. I guess it's not enough. Um, I think that some of the weaknesses right now at the moment are too much. Like you cannot be necessarily that limited. Now, Rasmus Hojlund shouldn't be the starting striker for United either way. Probably neither should Joshua Zirkzee, albeit he's really developing into kind of just a role as a 10, and in that role, I think he's actually quite good. He brings a
Mm,
lot to the table and has the last few games.
yeah.
Um, but I don't. There are very very few teams on earth in in Europe. There are very few teams in football that can get away with a striker who offers very little outside of scoring goals. Like Erling Haaland isn't saving City right now, when he plays from being shit, despite being a fantastic goal scorer, because he's very limited, outside of that, frankly. I'm not saying he's bad, but he is limited outside of that. And I
Hmm.
think that most teams don't really have in today's game, and we don't see it a lot anymore, out and out strikers who don't really contribute to aspects of the buildup, aspects of hold up play, all of these types of things that are involved. And in those areas, I feel Rasmus Hojlund has probably picked up more, maybe gotten worse since coming to United, picked up more bad habits.
Mm,
At the start, too much focus on the defenders, too little in using his attributes of speed to come back and make space from the defenders to attack the ball with some aggression, and then use his speed to get a distance and before passing it off to somebody else. Very often it's like it's a constant fight on the pitch, and I don't know what the reason for it is, but it's obviously it's hard to judge a lot of players, but I think it's pretty clear as well that in an ideal world, United would have a striker that is more well-rounded, given the way that we play, the teams, the the difficulties of the Premier League, but also just kind of what would suit the team overall more. I think the team plays better when Xerxes plays at the 9, even though he doesn't get in the box as much, but because he drops back like a 10, and we'd almost be better with 3 10s. But you look at a team like Liverpool, they kind of did that for a long time, and even at the present, they don't really have anybody in the front line just a goal scorer. Everybody gets involved, and I think United in their
Man,
current
they have
structure
Salah
kind
though.
of need that. Well, of course, and that adds to it, right? But I think most teams need someone these days as a striker who does more than that. Um, Now it would make a better situation if United had one for Hojlund to learn off of somebody and to not be under the pressure to be, in that position at all times of kind of needing to do that, role. So, it's hard to see improvement from him there, and it does seem like other players in the team can do more in the circumstances, but you know,
Here's the thing that I pros and cons. United play so much of the game outside of the opposition box, which
yeah,
is, as a striker, that's not where you want to be, right? And Rasmus Hojlund to me is a much better player than the player we're seeing. To me, the kid's confidence is rock bottom, and United's not an easy
yep,
team to play in as a striker, and it hasn't been for years, right? I mean, you had Ronaldo and Rashford, were the last players really to hit any type of significant numbers. It's since Ten Hag's first season, it's been a really difficult team for any striker to play in. It's
yep,
not, has functionality problems. To me, we talk about Gyökeres. If Rasmus Hojlund was playing in Portugal, I think he'd be putting up 30 goals a season. Right? I do. And that might be have been better for his development to stay there for a year or two and then move on. Gasparini wanted him to stay at Atalanta for at least another year and said he wasn't quite ready. Um, that being said, you can't be Manchester United striker, central striker, and not score goals. I
yeah.
mean, Liam Delap plays for Ipswich. Was he on double figures, isn't he? I
Mhm.
mean, to
And he
me,
makes often something out of nothing, like, very,
yeah,
very regularly for them because 'cause they're not a good team. I mean, they're going to be relegated in all honesty, and, he'll pick the ball up in a space, and he'll beat
yeah.
man, and he'll make something out of nothing and score a goal, and it's kind of like sometimes you have to be able to do that, when the team isn't working around you.
But at the same time, James, I sit here and I look at how would Erling Haaland do in this United team? How many clear cut chances would he be getting that he's not taking? I mean, to me, if you look at most of the clear cut chances, they've fallen to Garnacho that haven't been taken.
Yeah,
Um, but the fact is, Garnacho's making these chances happen. He's in the positions where Rasmus Hojlund should be to take these chances that he don't. Sometimes the problem with not spending an enormous amount of time in the opposition's box is because of the movement from a striker. You have to
yeah,
have an outlet. I accept the fact that Hoyland's picking the ball up in all the wrong positions. He's picked the ball up in the halfway lane, and he's picking the ball up and say 10 yards inside you need its half. And when your confidence goes, your hold up play goes, everything goes.
mhm,
He's really not. He should be a second. United should be able to take him out of the team and leave him on the bench for a few weeks and give him a break and put in a top striker, but they just don't have that. And so I'm concerned about him because he badly needs a run of form between now and the end of the season,
yeah,
James.
yeah,
Because you know he must be looking at the likes of Anthony and Marcus Rashford, going, maybe a move away from here would reinvigorate my career. And United really
yep,
can't afford to sell Erasmus Hojlund because
yep,
you're going to get a paltry return. They really need him to find his form. Honestly, if he did leave at the end of the season, it would really disappoint me because I still have a lot of belief in him that he can deliver as a top striker.
yeah.
And I think that I would love to see that lad become a top striker at United. I don't know what the answer is. As I feel for him because he looks totally lost.
Yep. Yeah, he does, and that is a challenge. I mean, but in the same note, it may be a season on loan if United bring a striker and would do him a world of good as well. somewhere else to play consistently in a different league and round things out. And maybe that's the answer. I mean, to some degree, I wish United did that more often. We've signed a lot of young players when they're not ready, and then they're asked to perform immediately when we could be getting players on loan. Of course, when you sign a 72 million player, which is not what he not held against him because that was not his value, that's not what should have been paid for him.
Mhm.
It's hard to justify sending player on loan, but that's something that hopefully is not continuing
Yeah,
into the future.
well, yeah. I mean, United just aren't in a position to do that anymore,
Yeah,
unfortunately. So, James, let's shift the conversation on. There's been lots of discussion, of course, over the last few days. I want to back up to something that was mentioned a few days ago. I think it was Friday about email from Omar Barada warning staff that they would be terminated for leaks to the media. And of course, this email predictably gets leaked to the
yeah,
media. Now,
immediately.
there's 2 points here. Of course, technically, Omar Barad is correct, right? I mean, there's certain things that's an ethical issue about
Yeah,
leaking to the media. But here's the thing, James. How do you define what is a leak? Because if you're a
yeah,
human being and you go home at night and you talk about your place of employment, is that a leak? Right? I mean, what human being doesn't do that?
yeah,
How
for
can
sure.
you even sack, like, if you bring someone into your office and go, I'm gonna sack you for walking out of this office and talking about your place of employment, that to me is very, very difficult to
Of
justify an
course,
employment
of
tribunal.
course, of
Um,
course.
it's different if you're leaking proprietary information, or intellectual property information that can do obvious irreparable harm to the company. That is clearly, a breach of your
Yep,
legal responsibilities. But it's really difficult to
yep,
sack somebody for saying this happened at my office, especially if it's factually correct.
yep,
Also, anything that's making its way into any reputable broadcaster or journalist, they're not getting leaks from ordinary staff. They're getting it from the very top. So the
yes.
information that they're getting isn't coming from your low level admin. It's
Hmm.
coming from the people at the very, 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 very top.
Yep,
And the reality is there is no institution in the world that has human beings that work there that doesn't leak. It's
yeah.
simply impossible. It
Not
just
not
doesn't happen.
Now, really clear to just on one little funny point on that, I think. Now, obviously, we don't actually know who that one was sent to because, from my understanding, that was not an all staff email, or it wasn't reported as an all staff email. So I think it would be pretty funny. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens from that. But I have a slight belief on this that somebody might have got themselves in trouble by sharing that right away because it might have actually been an attempt at finding
It's
some,
time to
because I
find
think
out
you're
who
right
the
by being high level employees. It's not the guy working, on the ticketing, or, I know those are mostly temporary match day staff anyway, you know what I mean? But it's not that guy or the scout or the analyst or the guy in the counting that's leaking the type of stuff we often see in the stories. It is at a high level. It is at an executive level. Now,
James.
there's a lot more executives than than
I mean,
than sometimes people think, but yeah,
first of
we'll
all,
see.
you have a lot of current and former disgruntled employees at United.
Yep.
Now, I've spoken to people who were in senior positions, shall we say, who are no longer with the club, that um, are more than happy to discuss all the issues inside the football club. Now, most of them to me are just things that you would expect in that environment that are really not salacious. And um, I'm not a journalist, so I don't. It's not my job to put that in the national press. But
Yeah.
I look at this and I'm like, look, there's you cannot treat people this way and then expect them to go out and not give some form of reciprocity. I mean, if you are running an organization, James, where you are constantly looking at cutting human beings, people can say, well, you get paid for your labor, but there's how you treat people is completely different, right? And you employ human beings, and so there's realism here. So if you're going to constantly put people in a position of fear where you're either you're on, or you could potentially get laid off. um you are either going to be on the defense constantly, where you're just looking at dodging, any type of, you're in survival mode. So therefore you can't build anything. You can't do anything substantive because you're just constantly worried about what's coming at you. Or you're not looking for another job because you don't trust, you need security that United can't give you. In that environment, you just cannot build. And so until United gets some sense of stability and say, okay, we're done with layoffs, we're done with everything from this point forward. You're here because you're a vital part of our team. Everything on this point
Yeah.
going forward is
Yeah.
about moving and building momentum going in the opposite direction so that you get accelerated returns, not accelerated losses. And when you're in that death spiral, you just get accelerated losses. And how to arrest that death spiral and turn it into a forward momentum to get to get those returns that comes with forward momentum is you can only get that once you have stability in your business. And with the recent announcement of more layoffs, I mean, you can talk about staff being United being far too heavy, United carrying far too many employees, the efficiency, all that. That's fine, that's business speak. But you're talking about human beings here, right? And
Yep.
so to me, when you're talking about sacking staff, making reducing United's their overhead to make the club solvent, I'm sitting here looking at this saying this is to me like a cocaine addict, cutting bread and milk, um, and refusing to acknowledge what the real problem is, that's preventing you from having a positive bank balance. You cannot sit in the office with the architects of this failure,
Yep.
of this, I mean, astonishing failure financially, sportingly, in every single capacity, and then say we're going to sack staff to get back to where we were. And even if they did, who's to say? I mean, United's
Yeah.
predicament isn't a mystery, James. So let's say they make the club incredibly profitable. I mean, who's to say we're not back here in 5 years because the Glazers are doing exactly the same thing? Like there has to be some sense of. I understand, you can't admonish, you can't, the besmirchment clause or whatever. You can't criticize the
Yeah.
Glazers, whatever. But this seems to me like a blatant denial of reality. Like the people that caused this problem are sitting right next to you and are still the majority
Yep.
owner. How on earth can I reinvest in this football club that was always highly profitable? And the reason why it's not sitting right next to you, why would this not happen again?
Well, yeah, agreed. And it's obviously it is a really challenging situation because I think we can sit here, on with different views, and I think everybody can look and say we probably needed to do a lot of these things, right? That are happening. These some of the cuts and things like that, some of the staff cuts especially, right? Like one could argue about all the little things, and I think that for sure some of that is going over the top. It's also pretty typical, but some of it's certainly going over the top. But we could sit here and look at the staff and say, okay, United probably needed to cut these staff down. I saw a graph today. United employ, I mean, Arsenal have like 50 coaching and analysts or technical staff. United have like 150. It hasn't done us any good, having 100 extra people, but cost a lot of money, right? But like from 2015, United had the amount of staff in 2015 that they're going to have by the end of this year. By the end of this round of cuts, they're going to have the same amount of staff as they had 10 years ago. And in that 10 years, with all the extra staff, and this is not blaming the people being hired in the slightest, right? Because it isn't their fault, not at all. It didn't make United more successful, but it all speaks to the incredible amount of kind of gross negligence that the club has been left with for such a long time that created the entirety of this situation, all of it. Um, every single ounce of it has been created over the last 15, 20 years, from the debt to dividends to negligent management of the day-to-day running of the club, of just more and more and more, as if I mean, here's the funniest part about the whole thing. Not really funny, but saddest part about the whole thing is that United built up one of the biggest scouting networks in the world and the most robust football departments in the world and ignored them, and then put someone who knows nothing about football in charge of them for 10 years. Once David Gill left and Sir Alex left, you had this. It was like, it's like, I mean, people use this example all the time, right? But it's like taking a corporate executive and putting them in the F1 car. It doesn't matter, how great the car is at that point in time. It's an utterly absurd waste of money to give them that car because they're not going to do anything with it. But at the same time, while this is all being rectified, you can't have a stable and settled environment. There is no doubt about that. It's and I think that one just kind of has to
get rectified. We know it's easy to make the cuts, but not to find the problem or the solution is totally different.
No, for sure, of course. Look, we don't know how it's going to work out in the long term. Like, we don't. There's no guarantees that they get it right and that they get the club back. There's no guarantees that is the case, that they get it right and United become a successful football institution. Even if the cuts are necessary, we don't know that they're going to get it all right, in solving it and putting the club back and building it up and in doing the right things. Because, of course, we know as well that, a huge part of the problem that started even before Sir Alex was retired was poor transfer spending, a vast amount of spending, poorly built team, not investing in it properly. And it's come time and time again. Well, they could just go on and make budget cuts that allow them to keep spending on transfers and get it wrong for 5 more years, and we won't get anywhere, and we'll be back where we started. Additionally, I think very, very much is the point to, as you're saying, that the majority owners who are responsible for this, and I think it is important to note that because it gets, for some reason, a very little mention.
Yeah, what's going on there? That doesn't add up to me.
Right. It's kind of wild. I mean, for what it's worth, from a legal perspective, the Glazers can do all of this without even consulting Ineos because they have the voting rights on this part of the club. The only part that Sir Jim and the Ineos board have control over legally is the first team, the academy, and the women's team. That's what they have control of. Now, I'm not saying they're not part of this because they 100% are, right? They totally are. But this is a majority Glazer-owned club with majority Glazer-owned decisions being made on a daily basis that's being pinned, and they're practically being ignored by a lot of people and looking at this. Now, we know that, unfortunately, and I know this for a fact, that it's that there's a lot of people not happy with this, but unfortunately, why does the debt not get mentioned in a statement about the restructuring of the club and job losses and things like that? Well, because why the hell would the Glazers allow that to occur? They've never acknowledged it once. They're not going to start now. But the focus definitely has to be put on them because at the end of all of this, if the Glazers are still here in 2 years, like you mentioned, they'll just run it back into the ground. There's no evidence they are capable of making any good decisions. When people have mentioned, and you've agreed with me on this point, this is a point we totally agree on. There's no way that Ineos or Sir Jim, for example, could go pay off the Glazer debt for them without equity. Because it would be unbelievably stupid to do that, right? But not just that. They could just go take the debt out again. They can just go load more debt up on the club again. In December of last year, United drew 60 million more in debt for running the club. In not last year, actually, but 2023 is what I mean. December 2023, in that quarter, they drew down 60 million more on their credit lines for debt. Well, with the money that was put in the last quarter, United paid down 20 million of debt. That's an 80 million swing. That's where that 80 million from Jim Ratcliffe went to, but he got equity for that, right? So that was investment for equity, for gaining more control of the club. He can't do that if the Glazers aren't giving more of the club up. It's impossible. It's fruitless. It's pointless. They can just ruin the club again, and they will. And at the end of it, that is the biggest thing, is that if they're still there, then it's all for naught at the end of it. After all of this happens, it's
this was always my
majority owners, then it's all for naught. And that is a valid point of concern for, I think, all of us, that the end of all of this, they cannot be in control of the club or it's all pointless.
This was always one of the circles I couldn't square, James. is how do you marry two different ideologies? The Glazers are rentier capitalists,
Yep.
and they have a certain motivation, incentive, and definition of success. And then you're talking about people that are claiming that their success, and I believe them, is defined by sport and accomplishment.
Sure.
Eventually, if your first principle is self enrichment profit, that
Hmm.
is going to make everything else a casualty.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
And so now you start making sporting decisions based purely on what the best finance. This is how you end up renewing contracts with players that
Yes,
shouldn't be there instead
totally.
of looking for players. And this is how you end up, with an inconsistent disciplinary set, policy that doesn't get applied equally, which causes massive rifts in dressing rooms. Um, so and you can't serve two masters. Okay,
Yep.
and they are completely intersectional. United are at a position now where they can no longer generate revenue to compete unless they have sporting success. But now they're handicapped in getting sporting success because they are so in debt. They're so heavily in suffocating debt. Because of the rules, it's making it very, very difficult to compete on the field. I mean, do United send the best players? No, right? Uh,
Yep.
when you look at the players in United's team, how many of them are getting into the top three, top 14? Not many teams, right?
Yep.
I'd say maybe two or three,
Yeah.
and that's a
Yep.
reality of where we're at. And
Yep.
so now you're talking about going out and buying young players, but young players, that development, as we've talked about, is very, very delicate. And United are not a football club. You can go to Brighton, you can go to Bournemouth and develop without the pressure of scrutiny every week. I see Wan-Bissaka getting enormous praise for his play at the weekend, but no one notices the 5 bad games he has in between,
Yeah.
right? But they notice that one clip, on
Hmm.
Match of the Day at United. Those 5 games are you get slaughtered.
Yep.
So you don't get the same, and that's young players need that protection. So they otherwise you're going to end up with another Rasmus Hojlund situation. You're
Yep.
going to end up, where you've got United's best young talent looking lost. Kabi Mainu, which looked a blue chip talent, is looking lost in Ruben Amorim's system. I can't remember the last time the kid had a truly outstanding game, but the season before he was exceptional.
Yep.
And this just keeps happening, and you worry about the same with Dorgu, and you're talking about a young 18-year-old right back in the summer in Quenda. These work if they're brought into teams that have experience too,
Yep.
that can protect young players and have the right environment. But to me, like, this is a big risk, and so I don't know what the answer is, James. But I would have to say that the confidence that I had in Ineos last summer is not the confidence I have. I mean, even if they go out and buy 3 or 4 players, are we confident that things are going to dramatically improve? Because there's no way this football club will be 13th. There's no way his football club should be 13th or 14th. I mean, look, the league
15th for
table.
still, yeah. 15th, I
Yeah,
believe, still, yeah.
James, that is unacceptable. That is,
Yeah.
there is no way, whatever anyone say, or that was the plan when they
Correct.
kept
Totally
Ten
true.
Hag.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Look, and they've definitely made some major mistakes, and we can accept or reject or question, and I think a healthy dose of some skepticism in the middle is worthwhile in looking at what happened last summer. We can look at it and say, well, it was because there was still fluctuation, you know, that they didn't have people in the building yet, that they had to, that they didn't have enough time to prepare, that they made mistakes, that on the football side of it. Because the fact of it is, you know, all the other stuff aside, they have to end up getting the football stuff right. If that doesn't happen, that's also all for naught. Like they have to get the football stuff right.
Mm.
While doing these other things, you have to get the right transfers and the right things and all of that. They're still fully and completely confident in the long-term plan with Amarim and where they're going
Mhm.
and all of that. I get it. I understand it. I know what they're doing. Even if I say that, but I'm gonna I'm good with it, but it has to work. And I think that we will all they have to be able to stand for heavy judgment um, this summer and in the season that ensues after that, because we all know what this season is. But in what comes this summer and what comes after that, they have to be heavily judged for it. And honestly, if they don't have to just do an average job. They have to get this summer really, really right. They have to do it really, really right. And United have to be much, much better for I think anybody to sit there and say, yeah, all right, we're headed in the right direction. And it's compounding when you're doing these things that are unpopular, that may be necessary, but
Hmm.
also the season is going to shit, like really
Yeah.
bad at the same time. That's rough. If United are we're like challenging for Champions League spots in a league, and look, I mean, it's kind of funny because fan sentiment, if they end up winning the Europa League or something like that and getting back into Champions League, there's going to be quite a different sentiment by the end of the season. Truthfully, and they could. I mean, when you look at that competition and the performances, they could. Um, that's not to say that that's wrong. When because mistakes were made. You sacked a manager mid-season. You fucked
Mm.
up. Whenever that happens, you fucked up. Honestly, like that's just a reality, and you have to kind of own that. And it's a bad time to make those kind of mistakes.
Do you know what though, James? In their Slate defense, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't to me a blatantly obvious decision that
Sure.
there was an
Well,
argument
most
that you
fans
could keep Ten Hag.
supported it, so
Yeah, I mean, to
couldn't have
me,
been that
I
obvious.
was not 100% either way. I could support it
Yeah,
either way.
yeah,
Ten Hag had just beaten City in the cup final. You got United back into Europe. Yes, the league season was poor. There was lots of mitigating reasons for me, and that where I could say, the football club going through, the obviously strategic review and all that, and the constant chaos behind the scenes. I could somewhat explain some of it away and say, okay, well, maybe in a settled third season with a football department behind him, and some continuity. Okay, maybe we can make this work. And I don't think United signings over the summer. I think Mazraoui's good signing. They elect him 50-50 on. I don't think he's terrible, but I don't think he's been outstanding either. So I think some of the signings that they made, this summer, I think Ugarte has been, I would say a 6.5.
yeah.
Not
And for a first
exceptional, but
season,
not
is
terrible.
he's on the
And
right track at least. Yeah,
and
yeah,
United are obviously better with him in the
yep,
team.
yep.
I think some of the signings, I think Big Xerxes, to me, is
It's
very
up in the
important in
east.
this.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's
Go
very
ahead. Go
important in
ahead.
this United team because of the
Yeah,
way they play so much outside the box. So you need a
yeah,
player that's capable of dropping deep with that level of ability, that has that, ability to. He's very technical. I've seen that clip against Everton where he skips past with 4 or 5 players, unbelievable. Um, and in a team like this, that's very important. Um, so I don't think their signings over the summer were terrible.
and Dorgu in January looks quite good for
Dorgu looks a
that.
good signing,
Good
yes.
value too.
Um, I don't think it's a good look for United. I know Anthony was sent off, but the likes of Anthony and Marcus Rashford going to new clubs, new environment, and yes, you get that 1 or 2, 3 game bounce, but
Yeah,
they look like they're better players than what United have in their first team right now.
sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And look, obviously that is probably not a short-term indictment because, as we've talked about in bulk, I mean, both Anthony and Rashford's kind of the situations that led to this have been multi-year situations, leading up to the point of not being in the team. And I think that both of them were bound to perform better outside of United for different reasons. But certainly, it doesn't look great when you're short, obviously short, and you don't have a lot of players up there, and players that you have out on loan are going and scoring goals. Now, at the same time, there we kind of had that with Sancho. He went over to Dortmund last year and made it to a Champions League final on loan, and then
Mhm.
came back and was still he's not exactly like lighting it up at Chelsea, and I think United will be pretty happy to have an obligation there. But
Yeah,
it's
Sancho's opening goals to
complicated for
me.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but Sancho, to me, to me, I look at that lad and I think what a sad decline,
Yeah.
because this was
It
a
is
lad with
sad.
outstanding ability, and
Yeah.
it just again, James, that period in your career where you get the wrong move, make one or two wrong decisions, and it has a enormous impact on how you develop.
Yep.
And sometimes you can get a player at 19 that looks way off it, and then by 22 they look fantastic, and it goes the other
Right.
way. So,
Yep.
but you know, I wanted to also ask you about Paul Pogba
Hmm.
because there have been discussions about possibly Paul Pogba coming in on a short term contract. Depends on who you want to believe on this. What do you think about that?
I definitely am two very, very split minds on this. Like as far apart as they could be, like schizophrenic level split minds on this, because
Mm.
I absolutely adored Pogba when for when he joined United. He was my favorite player for a long time. Um, the level of talent that he has, the what he brings as a footballer, and all that can be is one of the most unique things that I've ever seen, and just an absolute joy to watch. Um, it felt like he left United on bad terms
Hmm.
when he left, which I think is fair to say. It was not a good ending the last year or two of his time at United. Um, he obviously, it's been a complicated situation for him since then. I don't know enough about it. He's had some very things that I don't think are his fault that are unfortunate things that have occurred. From what I know of him personally, he's a lovely guy, a very nice guy. And so I'd take him in that respect, but I also think you'd have to stick with very low, significantly low wages. I mean, he hasn't played football in a long time, and all that. Like you'd have to be on a very, very a short term, very affordable type of contract and say, if he wanted to, and then great. And if he came back and somehow revived his career at Old Trafford, I mean, it would be somewhat poetic, but that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I've met him a couple of times. It's been a few years, and each time, James, I'll be honest, he was consummate gentleman. A
Yep.
really, really down to earth human being that never behaved like he was a superstar. He could not have been, nicer to me personally. And as a human being, he's actually quite a nice guy. And I feel for him a bit in that, the United team he was brought into never really knew how to get the best out of
Yep.
him. And I think that once you have a narrative set against fans and what have you, and against the manager, it's very difficult to recover. I mean, we saw the game against City. There's been times where he showed enormous quality. Would
Yes.
I want to see Paul Pogba start for United this weekend over what we have in midfield?
I'd rather see him over
Yes.
Casemiro right now.
The answer to that is yes.
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
now, did I ever think United would be in a position where they would be bringing him back in this capacity? No, but this is the reality of where we're at. If he has fitness, if he's capable of step, I don't see you give him a year and a half contract. If he's capable of stepping into this team, United in a year next season are not going to be in a position where they can turn their nose up at a really good midfielder, in my opinion.
Sure.
Maybe
Yeah.
2 years from now, sure, right? But would I take him in this United team? Yes. I
Mhm.
know there's going to be certain fans out there that are going to feel very differently. I understand that. But considering United's current predicament, considering where they are, it's February. March? Would I take Paul Pogba? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'd take Cavani back today, if someone asked me and he's, like, near 40 and playing in South America, so, that speaks to some of the quality, but no, I think it's a fair take as well, and obviously in the same boat, a low, a low fee, a small
Take
contract,
Jemba
low wage.
Jemba back right now.
Yeah. It'd be hard to look back and say, I wouldn't take that guy. I don't think I could find many of those. But yeah, I would tend to agree there. I think I have significant doubts that there's any chance of it occurring, but you know, it's an interesting thought experiment.
Do you have significant doubts of recurring?
I do, but I don't know. I've like practically dismissed the rumors out of hand, not because I can actually say they don't exist, but because just it's one of those things that like I don't even is it even I haven't even like it feels like it's so outside the realm of reality
Well, I
that
think
it's
Amorim, when he
not
said they have to focus on young players, when he was asked this
right.
question, answered the
Like
question anyway. I don't think he's going to be there, but
yeah, it doesn't
um,
fit like anything we're doing, and because of how Pogba left, would he actually want to? I mean, I would be hard pressed to answer that. I mean, if he would actually even consider it. I mean, he did this documentary called United Fans Idiots, which he wasn't totally wrong on, but like
I don't
uh,
even remember that, to be honest. I don't.
he said United fans don't understand football. I think it's more specifically
Well,
it's
I
more
mean, to be fair to him,
he's not
I
wrong
mean, he's getting. Well, I mean, he's getting it must like
from the
you get
perspective of a
a
player,
criticism from.
and
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
don't know. The United fans have had every right to be irritated at him, but
yeah,
you also get a lot of stuff that's being leveled at you that is just insane. It's just
yes.
nonsense, and this is a result, fortunately, of the internet. We'll finish this podcast on a bit of a positive. Um, let's speculate about the summer.
Hmm.
Let's say summer arrives. Ruben Amorim, who's on a shopping list?
Yeah, one a big striker is for sure. And I
So
think
no, 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 not a who. Also,
oh,
man.
specifically, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
no, no. Just
yes,
give me a couple of
yes.
names. Who do you think?
Osimhen, Liam Delap, um, and Gyökeres. Though I don't think it's necessarily as much as on Gyökeres as it might have been made out just because of the
What about
manager
Sesko?
connection. And Sheshko, that's an interesting one because last summer they were very interested in him still. They looked
Mm-hmm.
at him on a few occasions, and I wouldn't be surprised if they looked back. I'm not positive he fits as much in the way that Ruben Amorim wants to play because he's also a striker who plays outside the box almost all the time. All his actions in the Bundesliga are pretty much outside the box. Osimhen, you know, D-Lap, we don't really know because he's playing in a much worse team. But these are players who have made a lot of good work. In Osimhen in particular, he's a very good all around striker, but he scores goals in the box, and he's a real striker in that respect in terms of his skill set and where he spends most of his time. Um, so those are honestly, if you would ask me today, it's Osimhen and Delap. I would say
Yeah,
the two of
Osimhen
most
is the
interest.
obvious one, James. I mean, Osimhen is in his prime. You
Yep.
know, he's physical. He's very, very good. To me, he's the best striker out of all of the ones that are
Yes.
mentioned. This is
Yes.
a guy that United looked at over a year ago,
Yeah,
where
before
they signed
Hojlund, yeah.
Hojlund, and
Yeah.
Napoli wanted 100+ million for him. Um, and I noticed that
75 million euros now, I think, is the cost,
yeah,
which
to
for a
me, you
striker of
jump
his
on that.
caliber
Yeah,
is you
you
can't get a
jump on
better
that.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, you jump on that. Okay, what else we looking at this summer? Well,
The
obviously, we're
Kenda
looking at
one
young
we
Kenda,
know is
right back.
very, very realistic and is probably gonna happen. I mean, I
Who?
think the Kenda one, yeah,
Yeah.
at center back. I think they'll maybe look again at Gerard Braithwaite. I think did really well against us, by the way. I think he had quite a good game and did well against Liverpool. He was injured for a big chunk of the season, but has been a lot better, especially under Moyes. In the last few bits, I think they'll look at that again. United were willing to pay up to 55 million last year for him, so they obviously rate him. They obviously value him. We need a left-sided center back with Lisandro Martinez's injury. It's become a serious need. I would say they'll probably look at Gonzalo Inacio as Sporting Amarim's player there because he also fits identically. I mean, you could not get a better fit he's very similar to Lisandro, let's say. And in terms of his on-ball qualities, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better on-ball player in all of Europe for a center back. So that's one. Um, there as well. They have looked at Huijsen. I do
Yeah, Gene
honestly do
Huyson.
not know how to pronounce it. The young player
Um,
has a release clause. Expensive for a young player, but he's performing at an absolutely top level. So, he would also fit in there too. They have looked at him. They're looking at midfielders. There's a lot of young players, guys like Chris Rigg at Sunderland that they've looked at. And I would suspect they will look at some of those again. We've heard about that. Nippon ended up not making any kind of move. We know United were interested in him. Um, what was the other one I wanted to mention? There was a link from I think Fabrizio in January in Nene Dorgelis, who's a youngish forward in the Red Bull system. And my understanding is they actually did look at whether they could sign him in January, but the costs were too high, so they didn't. Um, and I think that they will very potentially look at him again in summer for another young forward. Now, again, you probably need to get. That's where I look at when you're doing that. I think you really do need to get someone like Osimhen in. I don't think we can just sign young players in this
Mhm.
team and get the balance right. I think we need, especially on the goal scoring front, because so many games are changed by the fact that we just can't score a goal. That
Yeah.
it would help. But yeah, I think that gives a good chunk of names. The midfield is my biggest question. Because we don't know yet, will Kone come into the team by the end of the season and become a first teamer next year? Um, we don't know that yet. We don't know where Kobbie Mainoo and Bruno Fernandes will land position wise. Is the long term for Bruno to play deep? I feel like it can't be. I feel like that would be a bit of a mistake. Keeping him away from the goal too much would be a bit of a mistake to me. Um, and what do you need in the midfield? That's certainly a question, and obviously also tied to Casemiro's future in terms of what you can spend, because he still has a contract for another year after the summer. So if he doesn't shift, can you even do anything significant in the midfield? I don't know.
I would. Yeah, I know this is a good question, but to me, I mean, there has to be some type of
Yeah.
solution to Casemiro this summer. Like, it's
Yes.
not sustainable that this can continue.
Yes.
And look, I said this in January, James. At some point, he has to take responsibility for his predicament, because he
Yes.
could have left. And if you're prioritizing staying, that's fine, but you can't complain about being on the bench. Uh, well, outgoings quickly. They
A
have to do
lot.
something to me about the Luke Shaw situation, about the
Yeah.
Mason Mount situation. Like, these are not easy to do something about either, because you
I
say
think they'll
find
have
a
to go
buyer
on
who,
loan,
who wants to buy players that
Yeah.
don't play, and it's a very difficult situation. But as much as I empathize with both of them, you can't have players. You can't be shutting a canteen and have players making
Yep.
millions a month and not play.
Yeah, and obviously they can't cancel their contract. So it's like people
Yeah.
looking at things like, oh, well, you have these players playing and you're making these cuts, but they can't. That's what they can do something about. They cannot cancel the contracts. But the closest thing to that, obviously, is if you can sell them, you sell them. If you can't, you loan them and hope that somebody else will pay the majority of their wages. I think for Shaw and Mount, um, barring a miraculous recovery that they think they might have, which is nobody better be betting on, or I would really think they're stupid. Um, I think alone is the best bet for them next year, because they both have too long of contracts to sell. They're both owed so much money, that nobody's going to pay them those wages on a deal. So you're talking about, if you sell them, with Luke Shaw, maybe you could get away with it because he's at zero amortization, where you could actually pay off a chunk of his contract as a part of the sale and still come out ahead. With Mason Mount, that's probably impossible because you just paid 60 million for him 2 years ago come summer. I think alone is the best bet there. And I know that they're considering that and looking at it, because if you can get 150,000 in wages or 100,000 in wages covered, it's still 5 million a year. It's significant. If you can get that covered, if they get a chance to go somewhere else and play, their amortization diminishes by the next summer, maybe you can move them on. So, that I think is the best bet for both of them. There's a lot of players who will depart where it's good they're performing well. As we know, Rashford, his performance, it's practically guaranteed someone's going to buy him this summer. Anthony, his performances are doing him some, definitely some favors there. Malasia's got a very cheap option. Other than that, you have Eriksson, Lindelof, Heaton, Evans, and I think one more who have contracts that are just expiring that they will let expire. So significant departures will happen. The biggest questions, I think, are Casemiro, Mount, and Shaw are the three players who are on big wages that are just you have to move them somehow. You have to. Something
Mason
has
Mount
to be
had
done.
5 Premier League starts last season.
Yeah.
He's at 4 this season.
Yep.
Well, that's on it. I mean,
I don't know that he'll meet the 5, honestly.
well,
We still don't hear when he's gonna come back or
I
anything.
feel
It's
for
like,
him, but
yeah,
how long do you persevere with this? And to me, that again is another decision that when United signed him, I'm looking at him going, this is a big risk, because
yeah,
he has these types of injuries, and he had so actually, if you look at his last 3 seasons, they've just been plagued with injuries. And then you wonder, just like the Terrell Malacia situation, even if you get this lad fit, what are you getting? What type of player do you have whenever? I mean, that's massive part of your career that you're missing. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. These are going to be some big decisions over the
No
summer.
doubt.
We will see what happens. All right, matey, we'll leave it there. I'm glad to
Sounds
get this
good.
out on a Monday.
Yes.
Don't forget, folks, tune into my friends' podcast and constant content all week. Some fantastic stuff. And we will be back again next week. Take it easy, man.
See you later.
See you, James.